The graph on Nadia's laptop showed a single clean spike. Not a malfunction, not a sensor glitch. The load cells on the 3rd floor of Aldwych Mill had been calibrated that morning. Each one zeroed, each one verified against the plate. And at 12:47 in the morning, they had begun registering weight. 138 pounds at cell 7, 141 at cell 9, 140 at cell 12. The readings moved in sequence from left to right across the display, each cell firing for roughly 4 seconds before the next one lit, advancing at the pace of a person walking. The sequence reached the south end of the north aisle and stopped. By the time Nadia sat up in her site office chair and understood what she was looking at, the floor had been empty again for 6 minutes. She opened the cell data a second time and read it from the beginning. Then she read it again. Then she closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while, looking at the window. Cells didn't lie. That was the entire point of them. Aldwych Mill had been sitting empty for 11 years when Nydia Halvorsen arrived to assess it. 5 floors of cast iron columns and original timber decking. The building had carried the weight of cotton looms since 1871, and the new owners wanted load capacity numbers before the architects drew a single line. It was the kind of job she'd done 40 times. A week on site, a grid of wireless load cells distributed across the floors, a report filed at the end. She arrived on a Monday morning with 2 equipment cases and her calibrated laptop, and she started on the 5th floor and worked down. The mill smelled the way they all did. Machine oil and old stone, a century and a half of industry pressed into the mortar. The windows were tall and north-facing, built to give weavers the same even, shadowless light across the machines all day. The floors were original timber for the most part, 4-inch yellow pine over iron joists, with later repairs showing clearly wherever newer boards met old ones. The newer boards were always a shade lighter, the grain running slightly wrong. On the 4th floor, in the northeast section, one of the original joists ran slightly bowed along its length. The center had dropped, as though something had rested too heavily on the section above it and stayed there. She had seen it in older buildings before. She photographed it, noted it in her sitebook, and moved on. By Wednesday, she had cells distributed across all 5 floors and was running her baseline collection. Every floor came back clean, every reading in range. Wednesday night, at 12:47 in the morning, the cells on the 3rd floor fired. She ran the recalibration herself the next morning, pulled every cell from the north aisle, tested each unit individually against her calibration plate in the site office, confirmed 0 drift across all 12, and reinstalled them. She added 6 more from her backup kit, filling in the gaps between the original grid so that anything crossing the floor would be tracked at 2-foot intervals. Thursday night she sat at the desk with the data stream open and waited. 12:47, 139 pounds at cell 3, 141 at cell 5, progressing across the display exactly as before, north to south, walking pace. The full length of the aisle in 5 minutes and 12 seconds, and then nothing. She pulled the door log from the building's basic security panel. The building had been locked from the inside since 10 in the evening and remained so throughout the night. She reviewed the footage from the temporary cameras she'd had positioned across the 3rd floor. A pair of wide-angle units installed on the first day to cover both ends of the corridor. The footage showed an empty aisle from 12:47 to 12:52. The boards perfectly still, the iron columns throwing the same shadows they always did. 140 pounds. An empty floor. A camera that confirmed the floor was empty. She was a person who had spent 20 years trusting instruments. That trust had always been justified. Instruments didn't want anything, didn't misremember, didn't get tired. They measured. They returned what was there. She sat with what her instruments were returning and turned it over in her mind for a long time, and she couldn't make it resolve into anything she had a name for. Friday morning, she went looking for something older than the instruments. The Rossendale Valley Archive kept digitized fire inquest records going back to 1880. The Oldwick Mill file from November 1908 ran to 23 pages. Coroner's testimony, a floor plan of the North Wing, witness accounts from surviving workers, and a list of 9 people confirmed present in the building when the cotton waste ignited in the ground floor baling room. 8 had been accounted for. The 9th name was Thomas Birch, age 31. Overlooker, North Weaving Room, 3rd floor. The inquest noted that a partial collapse of the north aisle ceiling had occurred during evacuation. A floor joist failing at its wall bearing, the section above the north aisle giving way as the fire burned through from above. Thomas Birch's location at the time of the collapse was unconfirmed. Debris clearance the following week found no remains. The inquest returned an open verdict. The damaged section of the 3rd floor was rebuilt the following year. She looked at the floor plan. She looked at her cell grid. The north weaving aisle matched exactly. The overlooker station was marked at the north end of the room. The path her data had recorded night after night, north to south across the full length of the floor. It was the length of Thomas Birch's aisle. She looked at that for a long time. Then she thought about the board joist on the 4th floor, the northeast section, the section directly above where the north aisle ran, the joist that had begun to give way the night Thomas Birch died, and had been carrying that weight ever since. Saturday night, she placed the loose board. It was a section of replacement pine in the south quarter of the aisle, newer than the surrounding timber, slightly raised at one edge, the kind of board that flexed under even a cautious step. She had flagged it in her site records on the first day. She positioned her final load cell directly beneath it and set her laptop on a packing crate at the side of the aisle, far enough back that her own weight wouldn't interfere with the grid. At 12:40, she turned off her head torch and sat in the dark. The mill had its own kind of quiet, not silence, but something layered beneath it. The low tick of iron cooling in the night air, the slow shift of old timber, the wind coming off the moor and pressing against the north-facing glass. She sat in it and let her eyes adjust, and she waited. And there was a quality to the waiting now that hadn't been there the earlier nights. A sense that the building was aware of her, that something in it had been waiting longer than she had. At 12:47, the first cell fired. 138 pounds. Then the next, progressing across the display the way it had done 4 nights running. Steady, unhurried, indifferent to the fact that she was sitting 6 feet from the aisle line in the dark. A person walking. A person who had walked this floor at this hour so many times that the floor had learned the weight of it. The loose board did not flex. She watched it. 140 pounds crossed the replacement pine at a walking pace and the board was perfectly still. The cell beneath it registered and fell back to 0, and the next cell lit, and the next, and the board never moved. When the weight reached her position, the fabric on her left sleeve lifted. Just the sleeve, a single second. Not the building settling, not a gap in the wall somewhere. The specific, small displacement of air made by something moving at close range. It was there, and then it was not, and she held very still, and the load cell at her feet held its number for 4 seconds, and then went quiet. She was looking at the south wall when she heard it. Not entirely a sound, felt as much as heard, low and rhythmic, rising from somewhere in the joists, the boards, the deep structure of the building. One beat only. The mechanical report of a shuttle loom completing a single pass. The reed driving forward, the shuttle crossing, the reed pulling back. A fraction of a second of work. One stroke out of the tens of millions made in this room across 40 years of production. Then nothing. The mill went quiet. Nadia did not move for a long time. She sat with the screen's light on her face and she breathed, and she did not look at the south end of the aisle. She filed the structural assessment on Monday morning from the car park before she left. 3rd floor north aisle. Load capacity confirmed. Floor timbers sound. No remediation required. Elevated cell readings across the survey period attributed to calibration variance in high humidity conditions. Report recommended for approval. She sent it and put the phone face down on the passenger seat. The drive back down the valley took 40 minutes. The river ran below the road through the old mill towns. Stone buildings in rows along the water. Some converted now, some still empty, some still waiting. She drove through without stopping. The mill was approved for conversion the following spring. 12 residential units, 4 per floor, the upper levels with views across the valley to the moor. She saw the listing once by accident. She did not look at the floor plan. On the last page of her field notebook for the Aldwick job, below the final tally of readings and floor dimensions and cell coordinates, she wrote 3 things. Thomas Birch, North Aisle, 1908. She closed the notebook and did not open it again.